you have ever called a sibling a parasite. What's a parasite, you ask? A parasite is any organism that lives on or in another organism and survives by stealing nutrients from that other animal. Yes, a parasite is a thief. The animal being stolen from is called the host. Hi, my name is Niehaus, and this is my 5th year in 4-H. I'm taking the vet science project this year, and today I am going to show you how a vet may identify parasites. Before I do this, there are a few things you need to know. There are lots of different parasites. We can divide them into 2 broad groups, internal and external. Internal parasites live inside your pet, while external parasites live on your pet's skin, like fleas and ticks. There are different kinds of internal parasites as well. There are intestinal parasites and bloodborne parasites. Intestinal parasites live in your animal's intestines, while bloodborne parasites live in the bloodstream and/or heart. I'm going to focus on intestinal parasites today. Many parasites can affect multiple different hosts, but it's common to group parasites by the host that is most commonly affected. I'm going to focus on the parasites of my 2 favorite animals, dogs and horses. The most common intestinal parasites in dogs are roundworms, hookworms, whipworms, coccidia, and tapeworms. The most common in horses are roundworms, bots, and bloodworms. After hearing these weird names, you might be wondering how the parasites got them. Well, it usually all comes down to the way they look. For example, the tapeworm is really long and flat like a piece of tape. And here's your resemblance. This piece of tape is long and flat. The whipworm starts out thick and gets thinner as it goes. The thick part of the whipworm is like the handle of the whip. Here's your resemblance. The handle of the whip is thicker. And as it gets thinner, that's like the whip part of the whip. Both of these parasites are commonly found in dogs. It is important to treat, prevent, and identify parasites because some can be deadly and do harmful things to your pet, some are transferable to humans, and others are hard to control, meaning they reproduce rapidly. You've probably heard the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, it is much better to prevent parasites than to treat them after your pet has become infected. There are multiple different ways to do this. In dogs, you can keep your animal from drinking dirty water, like from puddles or streams. This is important because if an animal, wild or domesticated, could have defecated in it, and if they were infected with intestinal parasites, the eggs of the parasites would get into the water. You can also treat them with medication. The medication given to you by your vet, called dewormers, can prevent your pet from getting parasites because if your pet needs these parasites, then hopefully the medication will fend them off and/or kill them. Even preventing bugs and mosquitoes from getting on your pet can prevent your animal from getting parasites. Because not only bugs like mosquitoes and ticks parasites themselves, but they can also be carriers. Mosquitoes, ticks, and other blood-eating bugs go from animal to animal, and if one of those animals that they bit had a blood-borne parasite, then they would become a carrier. So taking these precautions can keep your animal from getting parasites. In a similar way, we can prevent horses from getting parasites, putting bug spray on them, keeping their environment as clean as possible so they don't spread the parasites through contact with their feces, and giving them medication. You might be wondering how to tell if your pet is infected. Well, there are signs that you can watch for. In dogs, you can look for vomiting, diarrhea, and scooting. In horses, you can look for weakness, rough hair coat, potbelly, and diarrhea. If you don't know what potbelly is, it's the same thing as being bloated. So you can tell if your animal's bloated if their belly is really big and round, but they're not showing any signs of obesity, so if they still have good muscle definition, then your animal's probably bloated. Another reason why you should treat your animal is because of parasitic zoonoses. A zoonotic disease is any disease that can be spread from animal to human, and a parasitic zoonosis is any disease that can be spread to animal to human that's caused by a parasite. Parasitic diseases can be spread to humans in many ways. One way is by a dog licking your face. Many parasites are spread from one animal to another, or from animal to human, through contact with the feces. So if you come in contact with an infected animal's feces, especially a young child, because their hands are constantly in their mouth, the person, or potentially another animal, could get parasites or parasitic disease. Now, how do we find these parasites in our pets? Well, when an animal has been infected with intestinal parasites, the parasites live and lay eggs in the animal's intestines. They're diagnosed by identifying the parasite's eggs by the way they look. You can identify more than just intestinal parasites this way. Some parasites live in the stomach instead of the intestines, but their eggs are still passed through the feces. So I'm going to show you how to find gastrointestinal parasites, which means both stomach and intestinal parasites. To do this, you're going to need to do a fecal float test. This is a fecal float tube. You're going to need to collect a small feces sample, this is just mud, and you can put it in the float tube. So this tube comes out, and you can just stick the bottom in your sample, and just stick it in there. Then you add a special solution, this is just water, and if there are any, the parasite eggs are lighter than the solution and will float to the top. You want to fill the float tube until there's a small bubble at the top. This is called the meniscus. Here's an example of what it could look like. I know you can't see the meniscus on here, but it's there. Then you take your microscope slide and place it on top of the meniscus. So if any microscopic parasite eggs have floated to the top, they are now on the microscope slide. The slide is then put under the microscope for examination. The vet will determine what kind of eggs are in the feces, so they will get a treatment plan right for your animal. Here's an example of what the eggs found in dogs might look like. Here are tapeworm eggs, roundworm eggs, whipworm eggs, and hookworm eggs. And here's an example of horse eggs, bots, and here are bloodworms. This is the egg coming out of the egg sac on a horsehair for bots, and this is the bot larvae. I included both of those because the larvae is what you actually find in the feces instead of the egg, because this is on a horsehair. You do not need to do a fecal float for bots because the larvae are not microscopic. Now let's review. We defined parasites and why they're a problem in our pets. We talked about the different types of parasites, internal and external. I showed you how a vet may identify parasites. We talked about intestinal parasites in dogs and horses. And finally, we talked about preventing parasites. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions?